Hey everyone, today I want to do a video on my favorite alcohol stove of all time, a DIY stove. Um, I've seen tons of videos on YouTube. I've built probably 20 plus stoves myself. I've even done some videos in the past if you look through my archives on some DIY stoves. And this is the stove that made me stop building stoves and tinkering around and trying to optimize them. I'm an engineer by trade. I have to tinker with things and try to get the best performance I have. This is the stove that is my go-to stove right now. What it is a Fancee Feest type stove. And what I'm going to do is, for this video, I'm just going to kind of compare it to some typical traits of other alcohol stoves. There's no way I can compare it to every stove I've ever tried. We'd be here for far too long. So first, credit where credit's due. I did not come up with this design. The original Fancee Feest design was created by a guy named Zelph, and he sells a kind of professionally done version of this stove, and I'll put his website in the description below so you can check that out. And also I have to give credit to Hiram Cook. His video showed how I made this exact stove, a DIY version of Zelph stove that uses a cat food can and a tomato paste can and some carbon felt. So credit where credit's due. Thank you to both of those guys for helping me along the way. So real quick, just how it's constructed. I mean, you can almost just self-explanatory. Cat food can, and you just pull the top off, round the edge over. Tomato paste can, and you just cut it to whichever height you want. Get a strip of carbon felt and cut it around so that it just sits flush, and that's that. You can cut your tomato paste can different lengths depending on how high or low you care for it. Stability versus if you go a little higher, you can get a little bit faster boil time. So back to kind of the cons. Some of the cons that you typically have with alcohol stoves, and the great thing about this stove is how it alleviates them. One of the big things that you hear a lot with alcohol stoves is that they perform very poorly in the cold. So guys usually sleep with their fuel or have to tuck their stove in their pocket or something like that. I'm actually going to cut to some footage right now of a live test of this stove in sub-zero temperatures, and that should handle the cold weather performance of this stove. So check that out. Alright, let's do a deep winter cold test on this alcohol stove. As you can see, the top number there, it's about 2.9 and then 3 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit, -3. And what I've done, we've got a bit of a cold snap going here in Colorado, and I've left the stove here outside all day long and this bottle of fuel out all day long. So they should be at or near ambient temperature. So -3 degree stove and fuel or thereabouts, below 0 we'll call it. Now conventional wisdom with an alcohol stove would tell you that this is not going to work. You want to sleep with your fuel in your pocket or keep your stove in your pocket because the alcohol vaporizes much less regularly in the cold. But with this little stove here, we'll go ahead and give it a good fuel up. I certainly don't recommend using the stove like this, but just to show you how well this stove works in the cold. Oh, there you go. Lit right up. Now, I'll show you a trick. Let's say that it was even colder, and even that didn't work. One of the nice things with this stove, you pull it up a little bit, just a hair, expose more of that wick. Now you've got lots of alcohol to vaporize. Be careful that you don't burn yourself. But anyway, there you go. Below 0 conditions, stove sitting on a cold concrete surface, not insulated. Fuel also below 0. pour it right in, light it up just like normal. Pretty awesome. Okay, so hopefully you're convinced now that this stove doesn't really have the problem that many alcohol stoves have as far as the cold is concerned, and I really like that. That's convenient. Many alcohol stoves require a pot stand. There are plenty you can build that have an integrated pot stand, but the nice thing about this one, it does have an integrated pot stand, and it's also putting a cold pot on top of it will not smother out the flame. Some hybrid side burner type stoves and like the Super Cat stove are very susceptible to a cold pot putting the flames out unless you take, there's some things you can do like putting some little standoffs around here to alleviate that. But this stove doesn't have that problem. And even better so, many alcohol stoves require some preheat time to prime, or to the jetted ones take some time to bloom. This stove doesn't require that at all. Since it's felt based with the wick, you just light it and it's instantly ready to go. You can actually put an ice cold pot of water on top of this stove after it's filled with fuel and it's not lit, and you can just come in with your lighter and light it up, so you don't waste any fuel or heat whatsoever. And that's nice because, you know, if you build an alcohol stove that can boil 2 cups of water in 5 minutes, but it takes 1 minute of time to preheat and prime, this stove here, the instant you light it, you're off to the races. So there's that. As far as the boil time, I'm going to refer you to Hiram's video. Check that one out in the description. I haven't timed this exact stove, but he times his boil tests much more scientifically than anybody on YouTube. So I don't know off the top of my head how fast this boiled water in his video. I recall it was somewhere around 5.5 minutes, but check that out. Another benefit to this stove compared to many other alcohol stoves is its spill resistance. Stoves that don't have some kind of wick, you know, if something happens, you tip it over like that, and you've got liquid fuel dumped out and on fire, and you've got a big problem on your hands. This stove, I say spill resistant because you can still fill it up to the point where there's still liquid fuel in there, and then if you tipped it over, that would dump out. But if you put about a ½ ounce of fuel in here or so, it actually soaks completely into the wick, so it just minimizes that hazard, which is nice. Another thing I was just talking about is this stove, another benefit is its high fuel capacity. I haven't topped this out completely, but I think it'll take, well, maybe up to like 2 ounces or so, but more than I'll ever need at one go. And that's nice just because many stoves don't have that capability, so that's great. In fact, this stove in some situations actually has too much fuel capacity for me. If I only say want to boil a cup of water and I only want to use like just under a ½ ounce of fuel, if you pour it directly in here, it soaks into the wick, but low enough that you can't come in and light it easily. I mean, you can, it's not too bad, but it prevents a bit of a hassle that way. So what I've actually done is I've created a low capacity version for like the summertime or for smaller cooking tasks. It's the same exact principle. I've just taken that can now and I've cut it halfway through and then pressed the bottom and the top together, so this is kind of what you're left with. And then obviously this one's a little lighter too because it saves some height on that steel tomato paste can. So anyway, you can make them however you want, however much capacity you want, but it is nice, this guy, for like the winter time or for doing more than 2 cups of water, you've got plenty of fuel capacity to go, so that's great. So that kind of covers why, in my opinion, it alleviates a lot of the cons traditionally associated with alcohol stoves. Overall, why this stove is my favorite, why this is this or this one are the only stoves I end up carrying anymore when it comes to alcohol stoves, that is. The biggest plus for me is its cold weather performance. Here in Colorado, it's very common, even in the summertime where I camp, if you're camping up at elevation, to have frost in the morning, so cold temperatures are just a given around here. Maybe not necessarily you're going to have to deal with it, but you always need to be prepared for it. And having a stove that you don't wake up in the morning and say, oh crap, I forgot to sleep with my fuel in my pocket, so now I got to put my fuel in my pocket and wait 15 minutes before I can have my coffee. Not a problem with this stove. Lights right up. I like that. I also like that in general it's just a reliable, pretty much fail-proof design. I mean, you pour fuel in it and you light it. And a lot of alcohol stoves are like that, but the wick makes it even better because even in cold, even in wind, it will stay lit and it's much easier to light initially. I also like that there's no time waiting around for it to prime. I just put my pot on and go. Even though it's not the fastest boil time I've ever seen for an alcohol stove, the fact that you don't have to prime it makes it pretty dang competitive, in my opinion. And let's see, what else? Ease to build, that's a nice feature of it. It's very easy to build. I wouldn't say it's inexpensive to build if you have to go buy carbon felt, because carbon felt's kind of expensive. But if you have some, or you're willing to commit it to some, then it's a snap. I mean, you have to basically take your tomato paste can and just cut the bottom off. And you can do that with a pair of scissors. Also, I guess I should note that you want to punch some holes down here to let that fuel drain through. But just see Hiram's video. He does a... I'll let him be the authority on how to build one of these. And the nice thing with this stove, another thing that sells it for me, is it keeps all the pros that you typically associate with an alcohol stove. It's fairly lightweight. I haven't weighed these two. I will put the weights in the description so you can refer to that. But still competes really well. It also nests really nicely. This is a 4-ounce Nalgene bottle that I use for my fuel, and that'll slide right in there, and that'll go inside my cook pot, inside a little plastic baggie. And 4 ounces of fuel is plenty for a weekend trip or even more, so that's nice. Last but not least, the reason that I'm sold on this stove is my brother actually hiked the Pacific Crest Trail from Mexico to Canada, the PCT, this last summer of 2014. He carried this exact stove with him the entire time. It cooked every single trail meal that he had out there, and he had no problems with it whatsoever. He's convinced too. I made him one to take for the rest of his hiking endeavors, and the fact that it can withstand the rigors of the PCT, where you've got desert, you've got freezing cold, you've got rain and wind and just about anything that any type of terrain you can find in the continental U.S., and it gets tested through that and just performs stellarly. A+ in my opinion. So there you guys go. It's also quiet, no maintenance like you typically get with an alcohol stove. I love it. I see no reason that I'm going to start tinkering with stoves in the garage again. So I hope that's helpful for you guys. See the links in the description, and let me know what you think. If you prefer a different stove, let me know what in the comments section. Let me know what your favorite stove is. Thanks for watching. Cheers.